Right. Landback. How would you like us to introduce today? Is there a video you'd like to watch? Or what's the best way of starting the combo?
You know what? I hadn't thought about that.
Yeah. We could just go
why
straight
don't-
into it, but
Why don't we start? I'm gonna read the first interview.
fantastic. Okay, give me
That
one
sound good?
second. I'll just introduce the kind of concept and then let you cook. So, folks, today we have the lovely Red Falcon, who is an Indigenous activist from Turtle Island, and who a long time ago, about a year or so ago, maybe a year and a half ago, bought me this book and sent it to me as a part of a little care package, which was lovely. And I read it, and it was in part something that I read when I was recovering from chemo as well and slowly getting better. And it is a great kind of introductory collection of talks and interviews on basically I would say it's like the last 40-50 years of like anti-colonial struggles told through one person's experience, and then ultimately concluding that there is no liberation for Indigenous communities without the liberation of the land back to Indigenous communities, and that like anything else is a provision that anything else is playing into settlers' hands. It's a really, really good book. I highly recommend it. And I don't know if you want to introduce yourself before you speak about the book as well. But also, me and Falcon are really close friends, and hopefully we get to see each other IRL soon as well. And I'm super, super excited, and I'm gonna give you the biggest fucking cuddle you've ever had in your entire life. I'm gonna crush you. Anyway, please introduce yourself.
So she says, but there can only be one. But I frequently joke with her about how we're gonna have a fight at the top of a skyscraper with lightning and storms going, much like in the Highlander. But my name is Victor Jacket. My account name is RedFalconFNI everywhere except for where I'm not. Especially if you see me on Twitter, that's definitely not me. Yes, yeah.
It's not you on
yeah,
Twitter. You have a fake.
Mm-hmm.
Oh fuck.
Do I have a what?
You have a fake.
Oh, I don't know. There might be. I don't see why there wouldn't be. The people that I harass generally make fake accounts of people, so.
I said.
I'm Seneca and Scottish by descent. Seneca on my father's side, Scottish on my mother's side. Machinist by trade, alleged intellectual, according to the author of this book and some other university professors like Robert Beale. Father, and yeah, that's basically it. That's what I do.
Wholesome man, Indigenous activist, cutie pie that I'm gonna absolutely destroy when I see you. Yeah, so you would like to do a reading from the book itself?
Yeah, because I feel
Awesome.
like not only is this the first interview that appears in the book from the year 2005, it sort of sets the tone for Professor Alfred's philosophical development, and sets the tone for the book, which sort of documents the development of his philosophy and how it evolved over time, over the course of about 20 years. This came out in 2023, and the first interview is from 2005, so that's almost 20 years. He's been active, as far as I know, since at least the 90s, at least the 1990s. And potentially even before that. And if you would like to see a sort of a more intensive background on his life, there's an interview on Radical Narrative. A friend of mine, Milo Tatusis, runs that podcast.
Wait, you sent this to me?
I did.
Yep.
Yeah. I sent you a picture of it. Yeah.
Yep. Continue. Sorry, it would take me a second to get.
Sure. And he sort of goes into detail, I would say pretty intensive detail about his life, which also helps form, a picture of where he's coming from, where his philosophy is coming from, what it's rooted in.
Okay. Yeah, please take it away.
Okay. So this particular interview that's located in the book was adapted from a conversation with a man named Alan Gregg on TV Ontario. He had a show called In Conversation, and the episode was titled Taiaiake Alfred and His Indigenous Manifesto, which originally aired in June of 2005.
Okay.
When my book Wasaze came out in 2005, I made every effort and took up every opportunity to create space on the political landscape for militant indigenism and indigenous nationhood principles. Ironically, it was a conservative party political strategist who gave me the opportunity to reach a wider audience and talk about the concept of indigenous resurgence. It was the first time I had to defend what I had written in Wasaze and explain my vision for the future for indigenous peoples in relation to Canada. Although much of what's located in this interview is also applicable to the United States. My main goal in this interaction was to get Canadians to understand how pathways towards justice that are rooted in Indigenous values and principles are very different from the futures promoted by the Canadian government and Indigenous elites. What I was then calling Aboriginalism, and which is now known as reconciliation. So Alan Gregg says to Professor Alfred, Taiaiake Alfred, the controversial Native scholar, claims that Aboriginal leaders have sold out by trying to advance Native interests within what he calls Canada's colonial system. He's one of the world's leading theorists on the lasting effects of colonization of Indigenous peoples. Alfred is a professor at the University of Victoria, which he's no longer currently employed there. And he doesn't call himself Professor Alfred anymore, but I treat it like it's a lifelong title, like president. Taiaiake, most of us, if we see a Native leader who successfully negotiates land claims and is able to get Aboriginal law applied and self-governance within their jurisdiction, we think that they are a big success. You've come at it from a completely different angle. You say the direction that they're going is all wrong. Can you tell me about that? Well, I think that the starting point is that we have to understand that there are two competing agendas in First Nations politics today. One is the agenda of the Canadian government, which is the agenda, in essence, of Canadian society and is based on the visions of Canadians for what is a just relationship between Native people and non-Native peoples. And that's essentially a vision that was developed in the 1960s and 70s by Pierre Trudeau and the Liberal Party, which is basically a kind of assimilation and integration into Canadian society based on social justice principles. It suggests that what we need to do is look at the Aboriginal peoples as full members of Canadian society and eliminate any barriers to advancement. To put in positive terms. In negative terms, it means to eliminate any advantages that they have in terms of reserve tax exemptions and so forth, and make them full and participant members in Canadian society. That's the main agenda of the Canadian government, and the Canadian government has done a very good job in the previous 10 or 15 years, actually since the Constitution was repatriated in 1982, in drawing a cadre of leaders and creating champions for this vision among Native institutions and among Native communities. And actually, almost all of the high-profile Native leaders that you see in Canada, from the Assembly of the First Nations to the big Native communities to major organizations, even in the arts, you've seen have been this kind of cultivated? And Alan Gregg responds, and they brought into this basic notion of what the goals are. Taiaiake Alfred responds, exactly. And I believe most of them are quite sincere in this. They believe that the best answer to colonialism and to the colonial problem and its lingering effects is this vision, being of assimilation. And Alan Gregg responds, why are they wrong? Taiaiake Alfred responds, there's two reasons. One is because it is inauthentic. The authentic vision of indigenous peoples is not based on an assimilative model. The vision of the native people and what separates the leadership from the people in this regard is the fact that native people themselves, on the whole, believe in treaties and a respected relationship between nations, as opposed to an integrated vision of what is to be part of this relationship. And so you have a divergence between the leadership and what they're representing and the reality in the communities in terms of the culture and what grassroots people believe is the future in terms of a vision for a relationship. The second reason that is wrong, and I believe why it's failing, is that it's not responding to the central concerns and central problems within those communities. And these problems are not money problems. They're not problems of jurisdiction. They're problems of the psychological effects and the cultural destruction that went on through this colonial process. I think that's a good place to stop.
Gosh, he's so this is early on in his articulating of this being, this is essentially his kind of central claim that he has developed and sort of worked through, I think, for decades now, like you said. Was that his first book where because he was a US Marine, which I think shows at one point, you know,
he was on the assimilative pathway.
Culturally, very much so, right? Like the using of your body for the American imperial project without, at the time, obviously, because he would have been, I listened to something with him speaking about this earlier, but him saying, you know, look, at the time he was like a driven guy, right? And that is what society coded as like meaningful and influential, particularly for men. And that
especially in the 80s.
Yeah. The ostracization of indigenous folk had been so extreme that it was like, okay, well, this is a way of sort of, like you say, assimilating. Like how best to show that to the world? No greater way than to say, well, I'm willing to sacrifice my life for it, which he now obviously, I think he says he doesn't regret it, but he clearly feels like a completely different human being. But he understands its role in his journey, if that makes sense.
Yes.
To articulate fully now his like political vision of Landback, like that for him was conversely like a step down. It's almost like he had to like see the bullshit for what it was. Do you know what I mean? And be like, wait.
Yeah, and I believe in that interview that's in the background there, he does bring this up, that he sort of had this moment where he was in a foreign country and wondering why
the fuck am I here?
Himself as a brown man is in another country doing, I can't remember the exact words he says, but it was something of the effect of doing the bidding of the United States on another brown country as a brown man.
Yeah. Being a colonized people who then go and seek, like, this is the thing I think all of us have to be taught that the American empire is a colonizing like empire, both in its formation and its like foreign policy. We have to be, well, those of us who live in the imperial core have to be taught it, because we're conversely actually told that it's like really good and it's stability and democracy and blah blah blah, the American way, you know, which is apparently really good, and therefore we all have to go through a process of deconstructing it, I think, in our heads. Obviously not everyone from every background.
Honestly, the times that we're in now is the opportune time to do it. I think most
Yeah,
people can see it better now than ever before.
I think people can see the transparency of, like, it was Nakba, the commemoration of Nakba, the Nakba, or the, like, I guess the official beginning of the Nakba. It's never really ended, right? But this week, and there's just lots of conversations, and I think that myself, I've become a lot clearer in the politics behind things, and I can, like, talk about Indigenous rights now in a way by, like, trying to, what's the best way of discussing it, like, trying to explain and using analogies. Like, I speak to my mum about Sami folk, where I kind of use this idea of it's all about the land, in order to unpick her own, like, racism really against the Sami community. Now, she wouldn't see it as that because of the, like, liberal, you know, we're all Norwegian,
Yeah.
we're all, you know what I mean, the, like, whitewashing of the country. And then basically showed her some footage of welcome in FS, showed some footage of Sami folk, like, having their heads kicked in by police when they're protesting on their fucking land, in Sapmi, which is north. It used to be called Lapland, but that's, like, a bit of a racist term. North Norway, but Sapmi territory, basically. And yeah, I think that we live in a world where we can articulate this maybe slightly easier, at least from my perspective. And here's my question for you. Is it fair to say that in terms of internal Indigenous, I guess, self-knowledge and the cultivation of, like, internal knowledge that individuals have and communities have, do you think over the past couple of decades that's kind of flourished and advanced in ways that are similar to this guy? Or, like, what's the situation for you? And if you feel comfortable, if you share your own kind of story about gaining this knowledge for yourself, I think that could be really interesting.
Sure. I mean, I don't want to seem like I'm too far up this man's anus, but
he's a
I do
great
have
writer.
great respect for him, and I wouldn't say that he's unique in the sense that there's nobody else like him, but he's unique in a sense that what he's doing with his experience is probably having more of an effect than many others.
Because of the way he articulates things, and, like, the fact that he's just, like, a really good spokesperson and writer.
I think that there really, as far as I've encountered, there's not really a question that Professor Alfred will be asked or will not ask himself that he is uncomfortable giving an answer to.
Yeah.
There's a level of being straightforward that is, I think, particularly rare.
I think maybe so not, as well. Yeah.
And maybe not in the people that we interact with in our immediate vicinity, but in terms of the global scale, right? And I think that throughout this book, it sort of reinforces that opinion that I have of him for me, in that he's willing to question anything, and it really shows in his work outside of this. Is, he's going through the process of helping different Indigenous communities sort of analyze and modernize to their specific needs, traditional forms of governance. And you could see on that image there, Kanawaki Government's project. That's what he's mainly involved in now, and one of the reasons why he's not doing as many interviews is because he's particularly busy with that.
Right.
And the amount of value that has, not in a money sense, but like in a sense for the development of human society, the impact is, I think personally, far greater than maybe he realizes at the moment, or that maybe he does, because he's quite aware.
Can you expand on the governance project, and is it an application? Actually, I think maybe before that, we should focus on the kind of central theory that he espouses. But give me 1 second. I'm just going to bring up the questions I developed earlier that I think might be useful for people. So in the book, there is this strong through line which is kind of developed throughout it. Like you say, it's a series of lectures of which you begin at the beginning and then come to the end, and you therefore walk through his political development. He ties culture and reclamation together, and essentially comes to the strongest conclusion that acclimatization and accommodation is will never be freedom. That anything
Correct.
that
and I agree with that.
So do I, actually. And I think for a long time I would have been like, oh, I don't know, but I think the way he articulates it, I really do recommend people reading it, in terms of it just expressing this so succinctly, a very, very kind of straightforward way of demonstrating the importance of the land, which is basically, and this is what I kind of want to ask you to expand on a bit, but a big theme in the book is that there's this kind of idea of like, oh, there's indigenous art that exists and there's cultural spaces, and that's so good, and there are university spaces for indigenous people. Isn't that amazing? That's what we should be focusing on. And he pushes back on this and says that that's not enough, and that framing misses out the fundamental relationship of culture and identity and land ownership, and that without that as central, you kind of have nothing. So I was wondering if you would expand on that idea a little bit.
Absolutely, because I'm in full agreement with him there. So the idea of representation within a colonial occupation, in terms of, leftist or Marxist language, would be considered a comprador, right? To simply be, a token native character in a colonial society, it might get that specific individual money. It might even have some sort of positive benefit to a very local area community, because obviously that person, by their own financial success, is going to expand that onto their the local area wherever they live, assuming they stay in their community and not move to Los Angeles or New York City. Right?
Yep.
But ultimately, again, you're playing into the system, and that's one of the reasons why he makes such a big deal about the authenticity of the engagement, not only with the identity and culture, but the authenticity of the reclamation of land. And I think that I'm maybe because of my youth, I might be a slightly more radical than him in some areas. I know one of the things that he says is that there's an idea of nonviolence behind it. I don't know how possible that is.
I
While that's
think
preferable,
I think that we are seeing where non-violence. I need to be careful with how I phrase this. We need
the
to be
limits. We're
careful
seeing the
with it,
limits.
but I think that when you look at something like Palestine, Israel, and you see settlers stealing land, it is the worst kind of violence, and you see many, 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 many steps made to try and accommodate and challenge it, and we are at a genocidal point right now. So I think that this expectation that accommodation and negotiations will work is demonstrably failing in a lot of places. I don't know if you feel that it's the same for your community.
I mean, I've pretty much always felt that way. I felt that way. I mean, we think about, to apply it to something that everybody understands a little bit more, more culturally broad, right? Think about LGBTQ representation, right? It's done. It's never done authentically, right? A lot of the characters that they just shoehorn into stuff, they're not written by people within that community. There was a game Square Enix made not too long ago. What was it called? Was it called Forbidden? Where it had a black female main character, getting sucked into this magic world. She has these powers and everything, right? And a lot of people, I was super interested in that game, and I ended up not buying it because I had heard about how poorly written the character was. And when you look into it, it was 5 white guys that wrote this black female character.
Oh no.
The game had no black writers on it at all.
Oh no.
and
White gays,
like,
basically.
Yeah, I'm like, this is not, like, you had such an opportunity to give somebody a really authentic picture of a complex character, and what you did is you pandered to a specific demographic, and then constructed all the parts, all the gears and parts of this character that could have been very complex, with people who don't know what the fuck they're talking about. And that's essentially the same thing when you have representation within a colonial system or a colonial narrative. And I think he largely puts forth that same argument. I would like to see indigenous led media projects, like real ones, not ones that are trying to integrate into the existing system.
Absolutely. Do you know there's a tabletop game that's by an indigenous creator? I sent it to you a while back. And the
Coyote and Crow?
Pardon?
Are you talking about Coyote and Crow?
Yes. Was it you that sent that to me?
Possibly. I own 2 copies of the rule book. I also bought extra copies of the rule book and donated it to my local gaming store.
Fucking
that does
awesome.
Tabletop games.
So for those who don't know what we're talking about, Coyote and Crow Games is a tabletop publisher dedicated to bringing fantastic games to your table, while also raising the voices, ideas, and perspectives and imagination of indigenous creators through the game industry. It's owned by the Cherokee Nation citizen Connor Alexander, I can't speak today, who's the lead designer on all games we publish. It is a role-playing game that's a multiple award-winning, and it's nominated for sci-fi fantasy set in a First Nations alternative future where colonization never happened. That's really interesting. Do you know, I was just doing a stream with Raptor, who hopefully you remember, lovely human being.
Yeah, of course.
Good, I'm glad. He was talking about Afrofuturism.
Yes, this is essentially the same sort of concept.
Yeah. Immediately when I saw that, like the imagination of what. Oh, hey, Dr. Yasmin, can somebody give Dr. Yasmin a shout out, please? We do culture streams together, culture and politics and art and things. Also, as well, there is a let me see if I can just find the article he wrote that makes it very, very clear. like that the creators want white people to play the game. They just want you to make sure that you're not being fucking pricks, basically. And that, or use use it as a vessel to understand and explore. Don't use it as a I guess commodifying, paternalistic, noble savage kind of mythology bullshit thing. I can't find it here, but I'll try and
Basically, they don't want you howling and slapping your mouth while you're playing
no.
the game.
Oh God, yeah. Could you imagine? I mean, I could imagine. I literally could imagine. So
Oh, 100%.
Yeah, yeah. Don't be white, exactly. Like, you should go in using it as these people have created something in order for me to explore and understand another culture in the way that tabletop games, that's what's fun about tabletop games, is one, role playing in a world that you get immersed in. So just do that. you know
Yeah, I think if I'm remembering correctly, I just saw it recently. They signed a deal with somebody who prints 3D prints custom character figures, in order to
Ooh.
include hairstyles and styles of dress that are appropriate for the game and environment, and premise. So
Mm.
there, you go to the website and there's an app that you build your character and then they 3D print it for you, and obviously you paint it when you get it.
Nice. I haven't painted for a while. I
I've
can't
never
find
actually
the.
played a tabletop game. I have been part of the setup for one several times, and they don't hold my interest.
I find what's the name for one session? I forget the name. Someone, there's geeks in chat. Someone will know what I mean. One shot, is it? Where you just do a single campaign. That's what I enjoy. I can't commit long term either. One shot.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you,
Yeah.
King. I thought so. So sorry. Do you know what? I didn't realize how I am geek. I was looking because is it Taiaiake? Am I pronouncing that correctly?
Taiaiake, yeah.
Taiaiake says here. Taiaiake is now working in Kanawake on governance, where he's focused on helping removing his nation from the Indian Act on their terms. So I was taking a look, and this is the Canadian version of a treaty, I'm guessing.
Well, it's a Canadian law about how the state has to interact with the Indigenous nations, or how the Indigenous nations are required to interact with the Canadian government. More like.
Yeah. The term Indigenous person, I'm not going to use this there, means
you can. It's not really a slur. It's just it's a misnomer, more a misnomer than a slur.
Okay, I still would prefer not to.
In the U.S., our legal classification is American Indian still.
I mean, it also is used in the UK in a super racist term as well. So I don't know. It don't feel right in my mouth. But something I noticed here, thirdly, you are only recognized as an Indigenous woman if it's any woman who is or was lawfully married to such person. So literally just erasing femme Indigenous identity completely.
Yeah. Oh, 100%. Yeah.
Immediately from the get-go.
Here's the interesting thing about this. You remember Katie? You've had her on the show before. She's currently going back in the historical, record as far as she can to pinpoint the point where the phenomena of, we're going to say sexual assault, we're not going to say the word, and the commodification of the woman and the commodification of land overlap during the agricultural revolution, right? And that's a very good example of that. About the state in 1876, it was fairly common in European society for women to have no autonomy.
Yes.
So not only was that woman becoming the property of her husband, she was
Yes.
also losing her cultural and racial identities and submitting that in order to become the property of a man who was not of, as it says, Indian blood.
And when we speak about like how indigenous communities are affected in terms of like gender norms, this is what I mean, folks. Like, what Falcon has just explained really well is this is a misogynistic European colonial framework of what woman is, that's imposed onto communities through the development of this law. I can't imagine how many like genders and types of women were invisibilized in this process. Do you know what I mean? Like, how many?
Absolutely.
And frustratingly, I mean, I can imagine it's really frustrating for Indigenous community members as well, because then I don't know how many sources exist when you're looking through history and they're not like white anthropologists at best, or like just, I mean, actually no, not at best, they were all fucking racist anyway, or like government sources and stuff that exist. Like, how much of your own kind of framings of things exist in libraries and exists out there, or exists as oral history? Falcon, you're not supposed to fucking do that. Thank you so much. You fucking
needed one.
bitch.
You needed one more for your goal. Sorry, my ADHD was like, I need to make that number.
Can somebody? Okay, well, I'm paying Falcon for today something that we have been able to set up, which I'm very, very grateful for everyone who supports the stream. Even though you just gave some of that money back, you bitch. I've already fucking... Okay, I'm gonna slap you in Kenya. Fly all the way to Kenya so I can slap you around the head, boy. But basically, every month, me and the mods... Well, actually, and the community have voted. Everything I earn, 20% of it will be put essentially into, like... Will be put away, and then we use that to pay speakers who come on and talk to us. So Falcon's being paid for today. My hope is when we get to Kenya, I can pay someone. I'm going to Tromsø, which is Sápmi territory in what is known as Norway, and hoping to see if I can find someone to interview there and then pay them. But that's what the money is going to at the moment. We have a little pool of money already, and that's very cool. So thank you. I need to do some push-ups for you.
One of the chatters brought up a good point, and that was actually where I was going to go next. Is that yes, it is in fact very difficult to find a non-European lens on things such as gender relations, and that historians do often discount oral tradition as valid measurement, valid records of history. I know that there are at least 5 different genders within my nation, and not even everybody in the nation knows about those, and there could have been more that we just don't know about anymore. And this is actually one of, ironically, one of Taiake's critiques, is that the some of the information that we have has been filtered through a European lens, and some of it doesn't exist for us anymore. So we have to attempt to reconstruct some aspects of our own society by trying to determine, based on how Europeans misunderstand other things that we have records of, how they misunderstood things that we no longer have records of. So
I think, and all of it is, there's a book called Coming of Age in Samoa by Margaret Mead, and it's used now, it was used in my class at university to explain essentially the colonial lens of like manufacturing like literature. which was supposed to be like anthropological, with like a fly on the wall, just like studying people, and then you break it down and it's very like, hold on, like you're bringing all of your European values, you're bringing all of your European assumptions about what like power is, about what democracy is, about sexualities, about genders, and imposing it onto people. So then we get sources that are always like white gays, like always, because they were made by external people. And then if you have communities that, like you said, like champion knowledge, the collection of knowledge through like stories and oral histories, when you like seek to eradicate these people or displace them or move, like completely disrupt like the community relationships that people have with each other by imposing again European values on the land, you eradicate essentially that like entire rich like library of being. It's like an entire epistemology about how to live as humans are gone. But is there like anything that can be used to reclaim? Is there still processes and things that people can do? Because actually the Ridu Ridu festival that Elup is talking about, Elup I think is Sami as well, and I'm there in late July. I would love to go. Oh my god, that's so exciting. I would fucking love that so much. I know that festival brings together a lot of indigenous folk, because like the whole culture has been, like my mum told me when she was growing up in Norway, the whole culture was shat on completely, and they got told that essentially people were quote unquote savages. Like all the horrible racist framing of this community existed in her lifetime, and therefore sort of resisting and challenging that and having like, I guess like a cultural reclamation is very important. And as we know, it's not done without Landback being properly done as well. But is there anything that you've been able to do in your community or your friends and community members that you can like share, or is most of the history destroyed?
So what I can offer to people, and I've been offering this for a long time. One of the greatest texts, if you would like to understand Haudenosaunee society and politics and political development and sort of the establishment of the Confederacy in 1142, you're going to want a text called Kayana Renkowa, the Great Law of Peace.
Yep.
By which I believe I sent you that too.
You did.
Do you have it on you at the moment?
No, it's in storage at the moment.
Okay.
But
by Kayana said Paul Williams. That's it right
this
here,
is the version I have. You don't have to buy from Amazon, folks. This is just a link for reference.
Yeah, no, I'm fairly certain that you can get it from University of Manitoba Press, or might be a University of Manitoba Press. That will give you more understanding of what our society was like, about the idea of consensus-based government, which is completely absent from European governance models.
Mm-hmm.
And sort of give you an idea of what a functional matriarchal society looks like.
And do you mind if I read the preamble to people?
Sure, go ahead.
Thank you. So it says, several centuries ago, the 5 nations that would become the Haudenosaunee, Mohawk, Onondaga, have I said that right?
Haudenosaunee, Mohawk, Oneida, Onondaga, Cayuga, and Seneca. Although I know the actual name for the Seneca, and it's Onondaga.
Sorry, come here. My dog has just walked in with like a tree on his foot. What are you doing? Are you alright? My parents are away, so I'm looking after him. Big silly. Why'd you bring this in for? Hey? You wanted. Okay, we'll sit and listen, mate. Were locked into generations-long cycles of bloodshed, where they established the Kayanerenko Wa, the Great Law of Peace. They not only resolved intractable conflicts, but also shaped a system of law and government that would maintain peace for generations to come. The law remains in place today in Haudenosaunee communities, an indigenous legal system, distinctive, complex, and principled. It is not only a survivor, but a viable alternative to Euro-American systems of law. With its emphasis on lasting relationships, respect for the natural world, building consensus, and on making and maintaining peace, it stands in contrast to legal systems based on property, resource exploitation, and majority rule. Although Kayanerenko Wa has been studied by anthropologists, linguists, and historians, it's not been the subject of legal scholarship. There are few texts to which judges, lawyers, and researchers or academics may refer to any understanding of specific indigenous legal systems. Following the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People and a growing emphasis on reconciliation, Indigenous legal systems are increasingly relevant to the evolution of law and society. In Kayanerenko Wa, the Great Law of Peace, Kayanesen Paul Williams, counsel to Indigenous nations for 40 years with a law practice based in the Grand River territory of the Six Nations, brings the sum of his experience and expertise to this analysis of Kayanerenko Wa as a living, principled legal system. In doing so, he puts a powerful tool in the hands of Indigenous and settler communities. Hi, Nabil! Lovely to have you here. Hope you are well. And Nabil 225, folks. Oh, for God's sake. I cannot internet very well. Sorry, Nabil, I'm a little bit tired. I hope you're well, love. Please go give Nabil some love. They're out there doing the Lord's work as a... what do you call it? When you're not a lawyer, you do the step before lawyer, like counsel. I forget. Right. Sorry, did you want to expand paralegal? Thank you.
Yeah, that's right.
Thank you. Did you want to expand more on the concept of assimilation and accommodation versus like basically unapologetic Landback? I'm listening. I need to do 10 push-ups for you though as well, but I am listening.
Okay. So the concept of assimilation versus Landback would be most simply broken down, as we had discussed a little earlier. Assimilation would be the participation and representation within settler society and settler systems versus the concept of Landback, which is broad. I will say that different people have different definitions of it. I think it's very simply put the ability or the effort to restore indigenous governance so that there doesn't need to be representation within a settler system, which is often inauthentic, performative, and doesn't actually provide any liberation.
In terms of, I felt like in the book as well, there was a strong connection between cultural identity and revival and that process of Landback. In practice, What does that look like? Because, I mean, he had some trouble with some indigenous leaders who were like in power around him, right? And
Yes.
he wanted to, I guess, challenge that to a certain extent. Could you talk people through what? I mean, I guess he talks about it, but there were like
he does talk about it in the book. Specifically mentions that, you know, leaders that were too far up the
settlers' ass.
Yeah, too up the representation within the settler system sort of pipeline.
Yeah.
Found themselves unable to challenge his narratives because it would put their position at risk from the internal angle, from the indigenous angle.
Mm-hmm.
And they couldn't agree with him too much because it would put their position at risk from the settler state angle. So it allowed him to have relatively free reign to make those criticisms of those leaders. They were unable to really challenge his critiques of their participation within that system. And do you want to give me the second half of that question again?
So he was challenging like some leaders in terms of the process of sort of reclaiming cultural and land back rights. Where I've forgotten this part of the book, where did he get to in that process? Presumably into his own thing from the interview. If this is April 4th, this is really recent then.
April 14th, yeah, that was last month.
Okay, then yeah, he's working on his own governance project.
Yeah, relatively recently. I mean, it's been a long time ongoing project for him. And you know, I'm impressed with where he's getting with it. You know, I hope he's impressed with his work because it's certainly worthwhile. I would say that specifically in that section of the book that you're talking about, the main difficulty that he was dealing with at that time was he had, you know, indigenous youth that are, we have the concept of somebody who's from territory and somebody who you call a city Indian.
Okay.
And I would fall into that latter category.
Mm-hmm.
Because I live off territory and I grew up off territory on land that was ours at one point. So it's not like I'm far away. I'm only about 2 hours from territory that we still hold. But which for Europeans that don't measure distance with time, it's maybe like 120 miles. I don't know what that would be in kilometers. You can do the math on that one.
We don't do kilometers here, so I know what that is. The UK's a weird mishmash of both.
Yeah, but in the States we measure distance with time traveled, so via car.
Via truck. Via man truck.
Yeah, via lifted truck that has never done any work.
Yeah.
Has no dirt on it and is
pristine.
Rolls diesel fuel and puffs out black smoke. No, I drive a dad sedan, so don't judge me for the truck thing.
You say a dad sedan?
Oh yeah, I have a total dad car. I drive a Honda Cross Tour, which is like a Honda Accord with just a teeny bit more room and a hatch. So, but I guess the issues he was dealing with is he had one set of youth that was, you know, looking to go to work, or not looking to go to work, looking to relax. That was slightly more connected to the culture, or significantly more connected to the culture in some cases, than people from outside territory.
Mm-hmm.
And he also found himself, as a professor in a university, finding that there were young people who were not indigenous at all, who were enthusiastic about the idea and wanted to know what they could contribute, and that sort of thing. Also, people that were opposed. So, right, and basically throughout all his life, he's able to identify, again, through his analytical prowess, that his position within that, what's the word, is dichotomy, is that it?
Dichotomy.
Where there's two opposing things that one is in.
Dichotomy.
Is that the right word?
Dichotomy. Yeah. Got you.
Dichotomy. There you go. Yeah, it's not a word I use a lot. So yeah, he found himself with very, very unique ways of exploring how to move forward, while also not really having to deal with much pushback internally from the indigenous community, because a lot of the critiques he was making were applying to people who, if they had critiqued him, would have outed themselves as being too up the ass of the settler system.
So he kind of called their bluff a bit.
Yes. Yeah, I would say definitely.
He has a position. Was he ever seen as a, like, forgive me, I don't know this, but was he ever sort of seen as like a leader? I don't know if it's like.
Oh, absolutely. He's spoken all over the world. He was.
I mean, like any kind of like UN, traditional leader.
At some point.
Like, is there?
What's that?
Is there any, like, so he's obviously a leader, a thought leader, as it were.
Yes.
In the marketplace of ideas. No, I'm joking. But did he have any like indigenous kind of terminology of leadership that was given to him as well? Or was he always skirting around the corners, like, around the sort of borders of that, like you said, so that he was in a position where he could kind of communicate with the leadership who were maybe making compromises that he didn't want, and then they were in a, I don't know if him then being a more visible leader would have actually fundamentally challenged that. So I don't know if he had any kind of titles or anything as well.
So I can't be specific because I'm not Mohawk and I don't speak Mohawk, and I barely even speak my own language because it's not easy to do in modern society. English is sort of the standard. So I know some of my own language, but not all of it. But as far as I'm aware, I do believe that he was given a name or a title. I don't know what that is.
Okay.
And I don't remember exactly by who and what it stands for, what it means.
Understood.
Right?
Okay.
And I'm not sure if I'm even if I did know, if I should be at liberty to talk about it. That's really something for him to express on his own.
Maybe it's in the book somewhere and I've forgotten it. So that's why everyone should read the book.
I think if he does mention it, I think it might actually be in that interview there with Mylan Tutusis on Radical Narrative.
University of Toronto. There we go. Cool. I'm just gonna pin it for folks so that if you want it, it genuinely is a really, like, it's a very pleasurable read. He's very oh gosh, I don't know how you feel about this, because you're incredibly educated, and something I want to do more of is I did very formal, education, and sometimes stuff like philosophy and critical theory is really, really elitist, and a little bit like, I guess, sort of it feels like it's external and it's not about people's lives. And we were looking at, when me and Falcon were looking at the Black Panthers, the 10-point plan that they did. that's like making Marxist-Leninism like about people's fucking lives, about where they rest their head at the end of the day, about having a meaningful job, about fucking like racialized discrimination in the country. Like it made it human and real. And for me, it's all about the land. I've heard a couple of people describe it as a great entry level sort of source to understanding Landback from Indigenous voices. And I think it's because the way he writes is really accessible. Do
I
you
agree
want
with
to
that.
answer what you feel Landback is for come here now, beach? What a name. But
What is
is
land
there a
back?
succinct way to say Landback? Because like you said,
Yeah,
it differs a little, but it's maybe a
yeah,
spectrum of things.
yeah. I would say that, like, for me specifically, and I would say that I'm on the more radical end, and I think a lot of the people that I associate with are on the more radical end. Um, it's the abolition of colonial occupation entirely. Um,
Which doesn't
that
necessarily mean the abolition, the extradition
the
of
ejection,
settler
yeah,
people.
doesn't
Yeah.
mean the ejection of those who are here.
Hmm.
It means the end of settler governance,
Yeah.
right? Or settler philosophy of
Yeah.
governance. Um,
And colonial apparatus, if that
yes,
makes
yeah,
sense. I mean, there might be some communities who are like, this is our land and we wish for you to settle elsewhere, you know. But
right,
on the whole,
right.
I don't hear about that. It's
And
a. I'll be really honest with you, bro. When people come to my stream, and even though I stress, like I'm white and that I feel that people should be listening to Indigenous voices first and foremost, um, the thing I also feel like I should try and talk to them so that Indigenous people don't always have to be making these arguments. You know what I mean?
that's true.
Uh,
Yeah, no, that's true. I think. And here's another thing too: the complexity of this issue, right? I don't speak for the Seneca Nation. I'm not employed by them. I'm not a representative of them.
mhm.
You know, so I can't tell you what they would do. I can tell you what my personal opinions are on it. I can tell you what I see Landback is in my immediate vicinity. Right. I
Yes.
live in a city that was at one time Seneca territory. Um, if I had my way, uh, this land here would be repatriated into the Haudenosaunee Confederacy and would be the capital of a nation, an additional nation for uh, black people, right? Because there's a difference in terms of how you define settlers. Black people, specifically people of obviously of African, slave trade descent, um, can't be classified as settlers. They were brought here by force.
Yep.
Um, they didn't come here willingly. They didn't come here with the intention of stealing land. They didn't come here with the intention of eliminating the indigenous population. So their relationship to colonialism is much different than that of non-African descent people. And there, the older communist parties had the idea of, the concept of New Africa. I don't like the name because it sounds colonial.
Yeah.
It's
Wait,
a
New
lot. These
Africa
lands already have names. I
in
don't think that we need to
America.
change them. And to expect all the descendants of slavery to move to Atlanta, as the Black Mecca, removes them from their communities where they already exist, disregards the cultural differences that are regionally based. So I think, much like there is over 574 indigenous nations across the U.S. and Canada, and even more in Mexico, I think the idea of more than one, regionally specific Black nations is more appropriate. but I can't speak for the black community either.
Yeah.
So some of them might like the idea of New Africa, and I'm not saying that they shouldn't have some of that territory. Specifically, the territory of New Africa is settled within the territory of the 5 civilized tribes, which the 5 out of 574 plus nations that participated in the slave trade, right?
Right.
So some of that land is due to them via reparations. So I'm not saying they shouldn't have that land. I'm saying that the concept of New Africa starts off with an almost colonial basis of we're going to occupy and alter the land.
Well, you kind of have
Which
to.
is
There's no other way of, like, it requires the dismantling of something that already exists. Therefore, you know.
And that's why I'm not in favor of the name. I'm in favor of the concept, but not the name.
I see.
Right? But
there is something actually. I mean, maybe it's something that you can talk about like internally in your community rather than the black community, because that's not really appropriate for either of us. But someone just brought up the concept of Liberia, and I'd like to connect it to anti-colonial education. Now, hear me out. So we looked recently at the history of Liberia, and in essence, a lot of the people who fled America, sadly, I think because of what authors like Frantz Fanon kind of pick up on, like people were not given the tools to unpick like a colonial mentality, and quite swiftly another colonial state was built. By people who came from outside of that region, and then essentially, I don't want to say it completely, it was like another America, but there is a lot of evidence that, like, I
mean, Liberia was an American colony.
Yeah, that's kind of my point, and that there was a group of ex-slaves who went over and had not had that decolonization of like the mentality. You understand what I mean? Of like,
yes,
they had not been, for want of a better term, they had not been like they had not been given resources about their own indigenous roots, like wherever that was on the continent, because it wasn't Liberia, you know.
Well, in a lot of cases, when you're talking about the descendants of the slave trade, some of those roots can never be uncovered.
I can imagine,
in my idea, there's a level of integrating the culture of the area with the culture that is developed within the regional culture that is developed within the black community. The two of those need to come to some
that will be
some level of coherence, I would say. Not necessarily need to dictate one over the other, but work together. I'm
going to finish this question and then I'll come back to you. Come now here. So I'm just thinking about that, and then thinking about like the decolonization of like knowledge and the championing of indigenous knowledge. I know that the way that you work is like a bit in and out of communities, just because, like you say, you're urban, right? But could you expand on, if you feel comfortable, what that looks like and means to you? Or if you don't want to do it like personally, kind of more conceptually, and talking about the role of decolonizing your thoughts.
Yeah. I mean, for me specifically, a lot of what's transpiring now, a lot of what's transpired over history, before I was even alive, don't make a whole lot of sense to me. With the knowledge that I have of how the Haudenosaunee operated up until the point of the Beaver Wars, which was in the mid to late 1600s. there was not really this idea of conquering territory, of commodification of the I don't know if you want to call them the spoils of land, you know. The way that the economy was oriented could be vaguely described as a gift economy.
Mm-hmm. Did people have something akin to money? And by that I just mean tokens for like
yes,
tokens.
yes and no.
You know, in like some societies, it's about allowing trade through the use of a token as opposed to the value of something like.
I wouldn't say there was anything like a currency.
Right. Yeah.
If that makes sense.
Yes. Yeah.
Items were traded based on not just use value and labor value, but also the thought of spiritual value, right?
Would
the idea that
differ with
everything is imbued
Indigenous
with
groups.
spirit, you know, animism.
Okay, right. I think I understand. Yeah. Do you feel that it is imperative for modern?
I'd like to answer that question.
Okay.
Actually, I'm gonna answer the. There's another one here. Wait.
There's two questions. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so I'm gonna hit come here now first. They asked, how would you convince that people that are not Indigenous that Landback is a good idea? That's a little loud. Can you turn that down a little bit?
Yeah. Sorry.
Yeah, it's coming through my headset a little loud. Yeah, that's better. Okay.
Thanks.
So, this is as simple as I can put it. Is settler society serving you now? What is it serving you?
Absolutely
is it simply
not,
serving you the privilege of participating in a government that doesn't represent your needs, your interests, doesn't actually care about you, sends the money that you pay into this tax system to foreign wars and imperialism and, you know, CIA black site programs, you know, funds propaganda networks, you know, including Hollywood. Wouldn't you rather a system that is consensus based, meaning that everybody participating has to come to a consensus? This is not majority rule. That we're talking about true democracy versus the European specifically the European idea of democracy from the Enlightenment period on, right? And as it developed, because there were actual democracies in Europe at one time too.
Yep. Historically, there has been.
Yeah. Would you rather that system be in place, where during the time that we're setting it up, in order to make sure that it's authentic and functional, it has to have the participation of the people who know what they're doing first. And then once that process is complete and safe from manipulation, it can open up to everybody. And it can be done that way without anyone having to leave. Right? There's often this thought that Landback or decolonization means everybody who's not native needs to get out.
Yeah. There's honestly, when I
people
speak to people are really like that. I'll be really frank. That's like the white people fear is, I'll be taken
it's
from my land,
projection.
You know. And I just want to point out that we have mass deportations of black and brown people by the current administration in America and by the British state, who has just made a massive stance on immigration that will kick out thousands of people and cripple our healthcare service and literally destroy the country. So always remember what exists right now, because what exists right now is the export, like, is yeah, a lot of people being thrown out of the countries that we're both in, right?
But I like to use the Seneca Nation as an example of what that could look like currently, right? On our territory, we have people of Seneca descent. We have people that are of mixed race Seneca descent, like myself. They're mixed with some form of European or Black or African or really anything, right? Then we also have people who have no Seneca ancestry at all, also living on territory, also being employed by Seneca businesses, which most of the Seneca businesses, like the casino gaming industry, and some other businesses that we run. There's an agricultural wing. There's all these others employ non-native people, and in fact, if you took New York City, the metropolitan New York City area, out of New York, and if you took the casino gaming industry from the Haudenosaunee nations out of New York would be in a tax deficit.
Oh.
So currently, because our industries are nationalized within the Seneca Nation, members of the nation get per cap, meaning they get a percentage based on different factors: age, level of adherence to the ethnic standard, whatever. And then there's also some of that money that is made is also set aside for social programs, and these social programs are not always just for members of the Seneca Nation. In fact, there is a school district in Western New York that received a large cash injection from the Seneca Nation because they needed it, and the state of New York was not providing it to them. So it's
wow, it's almost like nationalized industries can be used to benefit communities rather than oligarchs, international oligarchs living it. Jeez, what's that like, bro? Because I don't fucking know in this country. So.
Now, I don't want to tell you that the Seneca Nation has no problem with poverty because of these amazing programs. But the fact of the matter is that these things can be done, do benefit communities, and these are the types of things that people are missing out on by living within settler society, supporting the existence of settler society passively, right? Because I don't want to suggest that you're aggressively like, fuck everything, go America, go Canada, go Mexico, go.
We don't get loads of those people here, but sometimes they do pop their head in. Sometimes.
Yeah. Right. For the settler, your relationship to the colonial system is what determines whether or not you are an aggressor. Right. So resisting the colonial system does a lot for to build a good faith relationship with Indigenous people and Indigenous resistance.
Do you mind if I expand on that, just as a white person? So this is something I tell people. There's two sides to this, which is so I myself am half Norwegian. There's a possibility, because I have a very bad autoimmune disease, that I will have to move to Norway. Because the nationalized health service there has used their money to develop the treatment for my pretty nasty disease. And the UK is simultaneously cutting disability and making it very clear that they fucking hate foreigners. Like, my mum's gonna have to get citizenship here because she could be deported, which is crazy. Like, if that's affecting middle-class white women, I dread to think how many people and how many families are very scared right now in the UK. People of colour, black and brown families. But the point being that a third of Norway is colonized land. Sapmi is a territory in the north of the country that is not and shouldn't be owned by the Norwegian government. Now, somebody brought this up earlier, but Norway will tell you it's really good. They've got their own government. They have their own courts. They have their own culture, babes. It's great. What do they not have, Falcon? They don't have the land. So I will give you an example of how I think, and I've heard Sami communities use this slogan, like Landback is Landback, and they're not free until they get the returning of land to them. I agree with them, is what I'm saying, is basically as a part of the greening of energy in Norway, in the north, a lot of wind farms have been put up. Wind farms massively disrupt the migration of reindeer, or some people call them caribou. Reindeer are absolutely like go hand in hand with Sami indigenous culture, ideology, and also like it's materially like a resource in a relationship that's like vital to the community. They took the Norwegian government to court and they won, and it doesn't fucking matter. Literally, the government's actually now trying to sue the Sami community. Why? Because the Norwegian government still owns that land. So no matter what, if you are always in that paradigm of we are pushing for more and more land back, no matter what, when it becomes someone else losing money, when it becomes the Norwegian state saying things like, well, okay, but we have our green energy targets. Don't you want Norway to be green? Fuck off. No, that's not for you to do on someone else's land. We can do that in the fjords in the south. If I move there, I will commit as much time as I can to supporting Sami communities in their land back endeavor as a Norwegian citizen, because I think that that's fucking vital. And I think culturally, as I'm also Irish, we were a colonized people for a while. There is I think for a lot of Irish folks, there is an inherent understanding that without land, you have nothing. You do not have identity. You do not have control. You can be robbed. You can be slaughtered. You can be controlled in like every possible way. Therefore,
the Irish are in an interesting position. They're simultaneously among the whitest and the least white Europeans.
True. I keep on taking the piss. I'm like, when I try and explain like my ethnicity to friends, I'm like, I'm just 3 shades of fucking beige. You know, just got a heck of a white ass. But the important thing there being, I have no fear about what the Sami communities would do with land. I see no expulsion of what would be Norwegian ethnicity people. I see a difference in the control.
People are not going to deport their neighbors and their friends.
Exactly.
I mean, I would say moral people are not going to deport their neighbors and their friends.
Yes. I saw all signs of my ancestry were colonized and robbed by the British. Yeah, Nabil comes from Mauritius, which I'm hoping to visit soon, but Mauritius is a Commonwealth state, and the particular like history of Mauritius is a lot of communities there come literally from like products of the slave trade, where people were taken from India and exported to Mauritius, and then people obviously simultaneously fled Mauritius because for a long part of its history it was a colonized state as well. I believe that Mauritius is slightly more progressive at the moment, but I'm very happy to stand corrected if Nabil kind of gives a bit more of a TLDR, and I'm hoping to find out a bit more when I get there. But the key is that people, I think, need to not put their anxieties of what actually colonial states seem to do, which is deport people, which is black bag them for criticizing the state, which is happening right now in America. It will probably fucking happen in Britain as well. Now, there's been these changes in the past couple of weeks about immigration law. Like that's the enemy. That's the government that's stealing your wealth and then using the money from your wealth to drop fucking bombs on Gazan children and then have your neighbor deported. So this is what Falcon's trying to say, is it is a different governance paradigm that I think communities should welcome as the liberation not only of indigenous communities, but actually of the land and of people themselves. It's a healthier environment. It is a more equitable environment. That's my personal take. As a pasty ass white bitch, but I put Basque in the category.
I agree with you. There's a general thought of
Hi, Chuck.
or I should say a disconnect between European governance and indigenous governance, and the main point of disconnect is responsibility. Indigenous governance enshrines responsibility as freedom, which is a very vague concept. Freedom is an extremely vague concept, right? If you believe in your own freedom, then you believe that you make the rules. And if you believe that everybody should have freedom, then you believe that everybody has that ability. And it doesn't quite work like that. Everybody has responsibilities. You have things that you need to do, right? If you're a parent, you have to be a parent to your child. If your job is, collecting firewood for the community, if your job is hunting, if your job is manufacturing, right? You have a responsibility to maintain these things in order for everything to work. Everybody has a place and a responsibility to maintain. And through European governance and European economics, it's often the offloading of the responsibility onto someone else while extracting surplus labor value and resources from the land and from the people to funnel back towards an ownership class. There was somebody asked the question, what exactly was wampum as far as commerce?
Yes.
That's a relatively complex question. I can't really speak for every nation. I can speak in my nation, wampum was not currency or not used in trade. It was used in the recording of historical events.
How do I spell it? W-A...
P-U-M.
P-U-M. Wampum.
And right there, you see, it says currency, but if you look right there, click that one, the one you
have.
The
Haudenosaunee flag immediately comes up.
Yes, that's the record of the initial joining
establishment of the
first 5 nations.
Nations, cool.
Yeah. So,
is this the original? That's fucking beautiful.
So if you scroll down, that might actually say that's the original Hiawatha Belt.
The belt is named after Hiawatha, the peacemaker's helper. In this belt, it doesn't say that it's the OG.
But there's the George Washington Belt. There's the two-row wampum. The two-row wampum was right there. That's a treaty between specifically the Mohawks and the British, but it applied to all the Haudenosaunee. That's basically said that we are two people traveling in similar directions on 2 different roads. Meaning, don't try to tell us what to do. We're not going to tell you what to do at that time.
Fuck. But it was fucking white settlers. Something I also want to say as well is, sorry, no, actually, you continue. I'll make that point later.
Yeah,
sorry.
Basically, these are historical records, agreements, treaties between our nations, other nations, and they all serve different purposes. So it wasn't really. I mean, you saw the Google result claimed that it was a currency, and you click the image and it takes you to a list of explaining the historical documentation of what these meant, right? So,
wait, is it because it became settler currency for a while? Is that potentially?
It might have afterwards.
Yeah, it comes up here. So it was used as slang for money well into the second half of the 20th century. And that's where moolah comes from. Huh. I did not know that. Something I just wanted to say as well is I think it's a national shame that Irish people who experienced a driven genocide by the British state, who exported enough food to feed Ireland like 10 times over whilst my ancestors died. Irish people then left Ireland and enacted another genocide on Indigenous people, whilst there has been and I think continues to be, a strong connection between some Irish folk and Indigenous communities that I am proud of. The flip side of that is that Irish people became a part of the settler colonial project in predominantly East America. And me and other Irish people have like a very different approach to this, but I don't really trust Irish Americans who won't shut the fuck up about being Irish American. I feel it's really
But there's a term for that.
Plastic paddy.
Yes.
Yeah. Dad fucking takes the absolute piss as well out of it. But look, I didn't grow up in Ireland, so I have a different relationship, I think, with my Irish identity, because it's the identity of forced diaspora by adoption. So I've always, I think, clung on to it stronger because it was taken from me. But I don't know, just 9 times out of 10, I hear people speaking about being proud of being Irish Americans in order to shit on someone else and make weird ethno-supremacist kind of statements. And I'm if you're not an Irish American who's working with Indigenous communities around you, you're not Irish to me. I know that I'm not I am not the judge, jury, queen of Ireland yet. But yeah, it's a part of the psychology of, I think, what people who've had to fight for their own decolonized state, even though it's a bit colonial still anyway, but should be adopting. And if American Irish people don't do that, they're really missing the point. They're kind of.
I can tell you that my relationship, at least locally, with people of Irish descent is relatively positive.
Yeah.
And I could tell you that the relationship between the Haudenosaunee and the nation of Ireland is relatively positive, as they were, I think, the 4th country to recognize our passports.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah, so there's currently 6, and we're in the process of meeting the global security standard with RFID chips and everything.
That's so fucking cool. These passports are a form of assertion of yeah, it's these kind of small acts, I think, that actually a passport is a huge act because
and you saw there it was first issued in 1923, so it's a relatively recent development that we've been trying to push for years to have it recognized on the international scale.
Decades of resistance. That's fucking cool. Decolonizing self-determination. How? Whoop.
And here's a simple way that you can help if you're listening out there. If you're a person who works at a border checkpoint in any nation in the world, and you see this passport, if you admit it, what you're doing is you're legitimizing the existence of our nation and people. The more countries that accept it, the less likely that the settler state can deny our existence.
Can you enter my country? Yo! Fucking let's go! That's so cool. Ireland acknowledged and accepted passports. I mean, it says it's just for the under 21 World Lacrosse Championship. I'd like it to be more than that. But
they've been there. The team's been there more than once since then.
Yeah, it's a big thing. I think they've recognized the Haudenosaunee lacrosse team, of which I have Haudenosaunee shorts, gay shorts, that are sadly packed away. So I can't have them on right now. But you can get. Is there a sale on in the store?
Yeah, there was.
Maybe not at the moment.
Yeah, let me see. Oh, I have my web browser open.
Yeah, this is cool as fuck. Do you know a website called Indigenous Watchdog?
Not that I've heard of.
Okay.
Nope. They're still on sale for $25.
What do I search to bring that up?
Here, I'm gonna send you the link.
Thank you. Awesome. Huh. What's a good film to watch, by the way?
They have quite a lot of items right now. All this stuff is relatively high quality. I will say that their hoodies run a little large. So if you like them loose, buy your size. If you like them tight, buy a size under your size.
So these are the shorts I have, and they're very comfy. I think they're cool as fuck as well.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, there is something that Dr. Yasmin wanted me to bring up. It feels like a little bit of a switch, but let me just have a look at our questions quickly, just to see if there's anything we kind of not covered. So actually, I think that this ties this together. How can outsiders like myself, or like people from settler backgrounds who are interested in supporting Indigenous liberation, how can they get involved? What's the best course of action?
That's a complex question. A lot of what you can do is based entirely on your geographic location.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Um,
what about people living in Turtle Island to begin with?
Part of the issue here is that there's a lot of nonprofit organizations that don't go far enough, or are much like Professor Alfred critiques in this book when he's talking about, Indigenous leadership in high places, specifically in Canada, but this also applies in the United States. They have a relationship specifically to the colonial system that only allows them to go so far.
Mm-hmm.
Besides my own, moral issues that I have with certain organizations, but a lot of that information is, internal community stuff.
Yep. There's something we've spoken about before, because I have like arguments with queer people about like decolonizing queerness in their head, and I think that it is more appropriate sometimes for people inside a group to have discussions with one another, rather than out. Like, there are some conversations that aren't for outsiders, if that makes sense, and I can imagine you have a host of conversations that are not for settlers, and that's just going to be the way it is,
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Exactly. You wouldn't call me up to ask about the liberation of lesbianism, right?
I probably would.
Might call me up
but... but that's because you're special.
You might call me up to like back you up, but you're not going to call me up to make the decisions, make the calls. You understand?
I think if I was, let's say if I was having an argument with a queer person about biphobia or something, I would want that to be like there are some conversations that people from outside can see and use it to ruin us. Do you know what I mean? And it's
Absolutely,
like,
absolutely, and
that's not
that's
for you.
specifically the point.
And they will use it. People
That's
will operationalize it to try and undermine, your
oh,
movement.
100%. I mean, you could even see it in that first interview that we were reading. The man interviewing Professor Alfred was of a conservative political background,
Mm.
and the questions that he was asking were particularly pointed about how the indigenous leadership was failing or was inadequate or illegitimate, or he's specifically pointing these questions. Obviously, Professor Alfred is incredibly intelligent and very well spoken, so he wasn't really tripped up by those
Yeah.
questions. But yeah, like that's how that stuff is played out, right? There are some organizations that have internal problems, and if they if they were made public, I mean, we're talking about risking indigenous American religious freedom type shit in some cases. So yeah, not every conversation is for everybody to be a participant in.
Yeah, exactly. And maybe the conversations that he wanted to have with some of the leaders had to happen behind closed doors,
Absolutely, 100%.
Ninja says, I work for a non-profit in Canada. 1 second. We're a community organization. It's often difficult to do advocacy because our funding is directly tied to government grants. So we have to apply for these grants and follow their rules just to be open. Do you do services, Ninja? Or I have a good example right now. We just spent a lot of time applying for an enabling fund, which would almost double our revenue and allow us to operate as an umbrella organization to the community and funding most of our partners who work with employment and literacy. I think there's going to be more to what Ninja is saying. But my question, Ninja, if you're still writing, is how does it connect to Indigenous communities? Is it the taking of money that's the problem, or what's the interaction with communities there at the moment?
Well, they also might be making a more general point in that there are standards that they have to maintain in order to keep receiving funding.
Yeah.
And that might also include the sub organizations that they are funneling funds into might also have to meet specific standards.
Yeah. This
in
is
order
something
for them to maintain that funding. That's a more general critique of nonprofit activism.
And I would say, as someone who has spent the past 3 months working with queer groups who had all of their USAID money taken from them, it's really challenging because the options are either to take money from some terrible corporation who will absolutely pinkwash your activities.
Yes.
Or you just get no funding because you might try and get local government grants, but your local government is homophobic as fuck. I am on that thought, actually, folks. We did a fundraiser for some queer groups. The South African group hasn't got back to me, and I've basically emailed them every day. So what I might do is send the money to some folks in Nigeria who I know who are in a very bad situation. I can't really tell you guys like exactly what's happening on the ground, but it involves lots of people not existing anymore. And I think if I can't get a hold of the South African group, we'll give it to folks in Nigeria who really need it, as long as I can get in contact with them. Sorry, that's just on the top of my head. It becomes a trap, right? You can't live. I mean, you can do self-governance. It is a much longer and harder road that takes years and years and years of dedicated fucking people working and the support of external people.
I guess what I was getting at is that there's a larger critique of non-governmental organizations and nonprofits, and that they can only go so far unless they're completely funded by regular Joe Schmoes on the side of the street. That they're always going to be partially subservient to wherever their funding's coming from, be
I
it a
would
government,
say though,
be it a
even if they have
corporation.
Joe Schmo on the street, the fact that you don't know how long that money is going to be there for has its own complications as well. I genuinely
Exactly.
see it
Well,
as
that's
a
true. That's
lose-lose
true.
situation almost.
I guess what I'm saying is that when you're funded by nobodies, and I mean that in a general sense. I'm not saying these people don't matter.
People with
I'm
like
saying
no expectations on what you do with the money. Yeah.
Right. That allows you the freedom to get whatever you want done. You don't have to call up Uncle Sam and say, "Hey, am I allowed to give money to this person? Am I allowed to, set this up here and do this and with the money that you give me?" You don't have to call a corporation and say, "Am I allowed to do this?" And then they go, "Well, yeah, but you have to put our logo on XYZ things." And there's a limitation for nonprofits and NGOs that
Absolutely. Yeah, and it's really frustrating that I think probably we'll lose our funding from the UK government in the next couple of years at work, but one of the big successes we've had over the past couple of years is like us not being involved in stuff anymore and us basically getting money directly. I do see it a bit differently in that the British government directly contributed to like colonization and like queerphobia in a lot of places, so I think we owe people as a form of reparations, and the more money that can go, but the most important thing is it's unbound, and what I mean by that is they can spend it on whatever they want and they just let people know at the end what they did. There's not like put our label, do XYZ, you can't do XYZ, for example. And that, I think, has been a huge success. And we were hoping it would grow, but actually, again, the trap is that the funding models of people in the developing, like global south, or underdeveloped, I should say, global south, purposefully underdeveloped by the West, is that it's just like a rug pull, right? And then you're like, well, what the fuck do I do now? Like, you are oppressing... the other side of your government is oppressing my communities, and now you're not giving me anything to help anyone. What the fuck do I do? And some countries have, places like South Africa have been able to navigate that a bit better because they had a lot less reliance on those funds. But it's honestly, the way I see it is I find it it's very challenging for people to know how to do this. But anyway, sorry, putting that aside, Ninja is saying it's used between French and English settlers about language, this like special money, instead of Indigenous folks, which is ridiculous. And I'm not surprised to hear that. It's like some colonial infighting. Like, no, our language is supreme. No, non, votre des langues, c'est magnifique. Fighting instead of like that money being put in place to actually support Indigenous communities and like language revival and stuff.
Yeah. And again, like I said, it's not that these nonprofits and NGOs don't do some valuable work. It's that the power dynamic is not ideal.
I often see it as like the systems, and I speak to communities overseas, and hopefully when I'm in Kenya can meet some activists and speak about this more. But like, you're right, the power dynamic is always one way, and I think the frustration is it's such a big fucking issue. It's like an entire industry. It's an entire international, like, neo-colonial project. Those activists might campaign about it and try and raise awareness, but they still have to pay the bills. They still have to pay their staff. they still have to give service delivery to people with HIV or something. So it's really fucking challenging for folks out there. I am particularly proud of the hot sauce community for directly funding a lot of folks as well, because then we're just giving people a bunch of money and resources to do the best that they can, and there's no expectations from.
And that's what
Hi,
I
Babylon.
do myself. Everything that I do locally, it comes out of my own pocket, or it comes out of donations from people that follow me. I owe nothing. I shouldn't say that I owe nothing to nobody, but
You are
I don't owe
beholden
anything
to
to
no
any
one.
government grant. I don't owe anything to any corporation. I don't.
You're beholden to yourself and your own values.
Exactly. I'm beholden to the responsibility to deliver to my local community and to the people that followed me and contributed to me, and that's it. You know, so
It was founded as English speaking to represent the English community, and we're trying to change it now. We're at least convinced our board member the English is just integrated part. This to me is very strange. Yeah, it sounds like you.
Is this
there's
in like Montreal?
It's gonna be somewhere in the east, right?
In Quebec?
I'm just gonna grab a snack quickly, dude.
Yes. So the English-speaking minority in a French settler territory, yes.
What English derogatory? Lol. Agreed. It's the goddamn Brits. What about people externally? What's the best way to try and support Indigenous resistance and Landback as someone like me who doesn't live currently in somewhere like Turtle Island or Norway that has sapped me?
I mean, it depends on where you, well, not necessarily where you live, but where your online presence is. Oh, give me a second.
No worries. Let's see. Othello. I'm gonna see if the dog's about. Hello.
Apologies, I got blocked up. You know, if you have any online presence, speaking out in favor of these things, speaking positively about them, assuaging the fears, and if you don't know what you're talking about, you don't have to be specific. You just tell people that that's ridiculous. You know, assuaging the fears of people that think that the reestablishment of Indigenous governance and the reclamation of territory is going to lead to white settlers being treated like they treated everybody else for a long period of time. That's not going to happen. It doesn't make any sense. That's not what people are calling for. You could say those things. You know, you don't have to be specific. You don't have to say that I know about XYZ. You can just say, I know enough to know that that's not going to happen.
Yeah.
Because it's not really what anybody wants. There are very few people that feel like that are sort of
ethno-nationalist, kind of like.
Well, I wouldn't even say that. That are preoccupied with a what's the word I'm looking for? Preoccupied with a punitive form of decolonial justice, right? Does that make sense to you? Not many people are preoccupied.
I feel that it's driven towards what Indigenous governance could be in a positive framing rather than like wreaking vengeance. Genuinely, I think it's white people casting their fears about like what the current American state is like onto, and like
the current American state and it has been, whether it's being led by liberals or conservatives, has been exceptionally violent, not only to their own population, but to the world at large.
Yep.
So there's a fear, which is, again, it's entirely projection, that they're going to do to us what we did to them.
Yeah.
And and at the same time, those same people will be like, well, I'm not guilty of that stuff. Then why do you have this fear? You know that it happened, and I don't think that you should feel guilt, right? I think what you should do is focus on supporting the efforts to move forward, to abolish the colonial occupation. That's what I think that you should be focusing on.
And Landback does happen. In the past couple of years, I've seen more and more successful reclaiming of Indigenous territory and land as well.
It's happening now in Canada and the U.S., even under the Trump administration.
Exactly.
So the colonial side is going to continue to take L's, and you have never had a better time to jump ship and get on a different boat.
I love that.
Because the one that you're currently on is sinking.
Yeah. And it's gonna try and deport your ass.
Yeah, I mean, if you're here as an immigrant and you're worried about being deported, I'm not telling you that you need to be in the streets and burning the American flag and all kinds of crazy shit that's going to get you in trouble and possibly deported. But what I am saying is that when you're talking to somebody and they're being a weird American nationalist, you know, you could say, well, that doesn't make sense, or the history that you believe in is a myth. You could point to historians like Tad Stromer, who used to be a public historian for American Heritage Sites.
What's his name?
Tad Stromer. Let me see if I can find him for you.
Tad or Ted?
Tad, T-A-D.
The hell is that for a name? Tad
Stromer. E-M-E-R. There you go.
Is he Norse background?
This guy spends most of his time tearing down the myth of the founding of the United States. You could go to people like Gerald Horne. I don't always think Gerald Horne is right. I think Gerald Horne is very valuable as a historian.
Excuse me.
You know, there's plenty of people that you could read to help you understand a lot of things.
Gerald Horne does a lot of speeches as well.
Oh, there's tons of Gerald Horne videos, you know, online.
If you're like me and you don't really want to read that much.
He's been on programs that I'm associated with as well. So, you know, I've had at least one disagreement with him, but I'm gonna let that one slide.
Fair enough.
You know, he's getting up there in age. But you know, there's plenty of resources that you can check out to combat the lie, because that's the other thing that you need to do is you need to admit that the promise of success and freedom and liberty within settler society is a lie, and it's part of a larger collection of lies. So
you mean the propagandic mythologizing of the creation? Excuse me, I've got hiccups. Creation of the American state.
Yeah. Oh, I mean, but not just that. Like the idea of liberty and freedom within European philosophy of governance.
Lol.
As it currently operates.
Lol.
Is a lie.
Sat in the imperial court. Lol. No.
Yeah.
See that here.
So the idea that the natural order of human society is naturally patriarchal and naturally hierarchical. This is a lie. This is a lie. So
it is a lie.
There are evidence of societies, some that still exist, like the Haudenosaunee, that took a different path. and that only us started to lean towards the path that European society is on in order to survive alongside of it for a period of time until which it could be freed from those bonds. And I think that time is coming. So does that help answer your question at all? Does anybody feel like I'm missing anything there that they would like?
I think it would be.
On?
I have one last question, and then I'm gonna raid out because I'm super drained. But I first and foremost want to thank you for taking time out. I hope that we can continue to have this discussion more and more, and it's never a one. Sorry, I got hiccups. Never a one day discussion, couple of hours discussion. And I'm going to remind people, Falcon is being paid for today, for the knowledge that's been shared and the time that he's taken. What is...
I wasn't informed of that ahead of time. I just want to be clear. I would have done this for free.
Yes, but shut up, bitch. Is what I have to say to that. Excuse me. Jeez, gosh, I'm getting sorry. My hiccup's really bad. What is a good film to watch? Because I'd like to watch. Fucking hell, I can't talk because I'm hiccuping so bad. Because I'd like to watch a film tonight that maybe explored Indigenous identity or Landback or something. Is there a film that you recommend?
Ooh, it depends on. If you're looking for a documentary, hold on. Let me go to my collection of shit.
If you have non-doc but fiction, that's
non-documentary.
If there's any, excuse me, fiction. Fuck me.
Okay? So you could try. Believe I have it around here somewhere. I don't know what the hell I did with it.
God.
Let me see if I ripped it onto my hard drive. I might have.
Is it Highlander? I'm joking. I'm joking.
No, that's a great film. I think you should put that on a 24-hour loop. No, I'm kidding. It's not. It's very much a product of its time. I wonder what I did with them. I had a whole thing full of freaking DVDs. I don't know what I did with them. Oh, you know what? I might have put them in these drawers. Let me just look up the title and make sure I have the title right.
Folks, I've got a Discord. If you want to join in, now's your opportunity. You might watch this film recommendation later on, and then I'll find someone for us to raid into.
So this is it's a relatively good film. I wouldn't say it's the most accurate film ever, but it's pretty good. Pretty good. It was written by John Fusco, who I've spoken to before, who also wrote Young Guns. He also wrote Thunderheart. He wrote The Wind and the Reckoning, which just came out not too long ago.
The Wind and the Reckoning.
Yeah. But the film I'm going to tell you about is called Dreamkeeper. It's from 2003.
Mm-hmm.
And it's about a young boy sort of coming to terms with his identity.
Cool. That sounds more my vibe right now.
By traveling across the country to a powwow with his grandfather.
Okay. What's it called?
Dreamkeeper.
The Dreamkeeper. This year or last year?
2003 came out.
2003. Cool.
That's it right there.
Okay. We're gonna watch this later, guys. Pop it in here. Oh, okay. You were lurking. Good. So, folks, I'm gonna read out. Can everybody Yeah, there's a massive operation that's begun in fucking Gaza, which is terrifying. I'm gonna raid out. We'll watch that film later. Can everybody please say thank you to the lovely Falcon here? He's a close friend of mine. Hopefully someone that I'm seeing soon as well. IRL. And I super appreciate you taking the time today to talk to us as well.
Yeah, you're welcome.
For being so handsome.
Yeah, I said Yahweh to me for being so handsome.
He's humble, as you can see, guys.
Yeah, it's all a joke. I actually hate myself.
No, I'ma tackle you. I'ma cuddle you. Let's go to Hugo. So we're gonna have a raid out, guys. I will try and put this this conversation, save it and put it on my YouTube, because it's been really illuminating. Just again, guys, so the book is called It's All About the Land, and it's highly, highly, highly recommended as a engaging and interesting and well written and well explored sort of approach to Landback.
Yep, it's all about the land. Collected talks and interviews on Indigenous resistance by Taiaiake Alfred, edited and with an introduction by Anne Rogers and a foreword by Pamela Palmater, and it was published in 2023. I say, yeah, 2023, University of Toronto Press.
Cool. Okay, love, I'm gonna raid out. So, guys, you have your raid message there. Everyone says we love Falcon round here. Damn straight, and Falcon's getting rugby tackled with my love at some point soon, hopefully. I will, in about an hour or two, be in the Discord watching that film, because it looks really nice. Folks, it's my birthday on Tuesday. Excuse me, I'm going out for a meal with some friends on Wednesday and then going hiking. So, on the weekend. So, I think on Tuesday we can do something fun. And I'll figure out exactly what at a later time. But, yet again, thank you so much, Falcon. Sorry I got hiccups at the end as well. I can't talk very well. But, have a great evening. You are the... Shut up.
Yeah. I'm a DEI hire for Big A Incorporated.
All right, folks. Have fun with...
Meaning I'm the straight cis male.
You are the honorary straight.
Big A Inc.
Okay, have fun. Right, I've raided over. I think I need to do the same in Kick as well. I just don't know how. Fuck, I forget what host. Okay. There. Right, dude, I'm gonna bounce. Because I'm tired.
Alright.
I'm gonna watch that film as well.
Alright, I'll talk to you later.
Speak soon, love. Thank you for today. It was lovely.
You're welcome.